Experience, right?
My apologies.
No problem.
Oh. Now that we know we're recording, so every presentation is recorded and then uploaded online. You can navigate to the OLLI website at humboldt.edu/OLLI, OLLI, select news and events in the top toolbar and click on brown bag presentations. This takes you to the homepage for the brown bag lunch, where you will see upcoming presentations. To locate the archive, click on the link titled Missed a Presentation. Check out the archive. First image provided. From there, all previous presentations will be provided. So all the office information. We hope you enjoy today's presentation and will help us continue providing these excellent free community presentations by joining OLLI or making a donation to OLLI at Cal Poly Humboldt today. Thank you for staying connected with OLLI. You can always reach us through email at olli@humboldt.edu, or feel free to call us at 707-826-5880 during OLLI business hours. Now, Jane Woodward will be introducing our presenter today. Thank you so much. Take it away, Jane.
And I am happy to see you all here today. And it's coming the first day of summer. Aren't we lucky? It's overdue. So we're very happy to have it. And I'm very happy to have Elaine Hogan here today. She's the first executive director of the Great Redwood Trail Agency, a newly formed public agency created in 2022 to replace the North Coast Railroad Authority that, among other things, had gone broke. Prior to this role, she worked for the County of Humboldt in the Healthy Communities Division of DHHS Public Health, where she managed the planning and implementation of grant-funded health education programs. She became bilingual after serving 3 years in the Peace Corps, living in a rural village in the mountains of Honduras. She holds a BA in political science with a minor in geography from HSU and an MS in international development studies from the Norwegian University of Life Sciences. Sounds interesting. She lives in Blue Lake and currently serves on the Blue Lake Planning Commission. Elaine, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Jane. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm going to get my presentation going. All right. Hopefully, let's see. Here we go. Great. So, as Jane mentioned, I'm Elaine Hogan. I'm the executive director of the Great Redwood Trail Agency, and we have just been formed in the last couple of years. So I'm the very first executive director, and we are at an exciting time in the development of this this kind of legacy project here on the North Coast. So I wanted to take some time today to talk to you all more about where we and where we've been and where we're going. So let's just jump right into it. I'm hoping we'll have plenty of time for questions and some discussion as well towards the end. So instead of a formal agenda, I just kind of came up with some questions that I'm hoping my presentation will answer for you all. So everything from what is the Great Redwood Trail, what are the goals of the projects? We'll talk a little bit about what the trail will look like in different areas. What are some of the next steps? Go into a little bit about the history of the project. What kinds of trail amenities are being planned? What will it actually look like? And I want to talk about our draft master plan. This is a huge milestone in the planning phase for the overall project. And so we just recently released our draft master plan. So I want to go over what you can find in there and how you can access it, how to navigate it. And talk a little bit more about how we'll use the draft master plan, the final version when it comes out next year, as an agency and in future trail projects. And we'll talk a little bit about next steps in terms of which trail segments are being prioritized and planned for next. So that's kind of a little roadmap of questions that I will hope to answer throughout the presentation. And then again, happy to answer any of your questions at the end. So what is the Great Redwood Trail? It is envisioned as a 307-mile multi-use rail trail project connecting San Francisco Bay with Humboldt Bay. And I should mention that the Great Redwood Trail Agency, which is the agency I work for, is in charge of the northern segment. So from right around Cloverdale, right around the Mendocino, Sonoma County line, north. So Mendocino County, Humboldt County, and there's a tiny bit of the trail in Trinity County. And so that is what the Great Redwood Trail Agency is in charge of planning and operating. So the general path follows the inactive North Coast Railroad Authority rail line, which you all know has not run in quite some time now. And so using the railroad right-of-way for a public use as a trail. So it really transforms, the goal is to really transform the rail corridor into a community asset and an economic engine for the North Coast. So that is the goal. And just a little bit about rail trails. Some people aren't as familiar with this concept. It's probably started, I'd say in the 80s, as you know, railroad industry and the use of railroad for transportation kind of was on the decline as the trucking industry was more widely used and became a cheaper mode of transportation. And so all over the country, we ended up with these, you know, defunct and abandoned rail lines. And so people started thinking in their communities about how we could best use that asset for public good. And so there are about 25,000 miles of rail trails in the US and about 1,000 miles in California. So here are some pictures. The Olympic Discovery Trail is a good example. And also here in California, the Biz Johnson National Recreation Trail, kind of near Susanville, is another example here in California. So rail trails support recreation, economic development, tourism, active transportation, and environmental restoration, and mainly pass through towns and rural areas. So it can be a real asset to rural areas that you know, used to have a lot of train traffic and have now kind of gone by the wayside. So a good way to revitalize those areas. Some of the goals of the project in terms of how we're thinking about planning, designing, constructing it, and operating and maintaining it. These are some examples of some of the community benefits that come from revitalizing that abandoned railroad corridor. So again, it creates a world-class recreational experience that can accommodate many different user groups. So we're planning for wheelchair users, equestrian use, bikers, rafters, because we do go along the Russian River and the Eel River for a little ways along the trail. So lots of recreation opportunities. Also the opportunity to access state parks. California state parks down on Avenue of the Giants and Founders Grove goes right along some of our railroad property, and some opportunity to provide non-automobile access to state parks and other public lands. BLM land is another one of our neighbors adjacent to our parcels, so that's exciting. And really looking at the corridor, you know, it's a long linear corridor, sometimes up to 100 feet or more in width. And so looking at how that can be used for wildfire resilience. So with proper vegetation management, it can be a fire break, for example, in the rural areas, and provide access for firefighters. Also thinking about how to protect the tribal cultural resources and other cultural resources of importance. We know that the trail will pass through various ancestral and current tribal lands. And so really looking at how to plan and design the trail so as not to impact those important resources. And sensitive plant and animal species, you know, what can we do during the construction and design and planning, and also ongoing operations to protect those species. Restoring habitat for wildlife is another great project goal. And enhancing native landscaping. You know, you have this abandoned corridor that has been severely neglected, and obviously when the railroad was constructed more than 100 years ago, they weren't really thinking about things like wildlife habitat and native landscaping. So we have the opportunity to go in and revitalize those areas with kind of that new mind frame, new mindset that we have. Similarly with watershed restoration and fish passage improvements, that's actually something that's called out in our enabling legislation that created our agency, is that as we're designing and constructing, we need to be enhancing fish passage because again, the railroad, that wasn't something that they really took into consideration. And so a lot of creeks were just kind of cut off from reaching the river by the railroad coming in. And so really looking to enhance the watershed and fish passage. Economic development opportunities, another huge opportunity with the development of the trail. People need amenities, right? I mean, when you all travel to go hiking, you need somewhere to stay, you need somewhere to eat, you might want to rent equipment and gear. You might not want to walk the whole trail. Shuttle service to carry your backpack from one place to another while you just hike with your little day pack. So a variety of amenities and trail-oriented development that'll be an exciting part to see in our community as we develop trail. And the trail is an example of green infrastructure, sustainable transportation networks, especially here around the Humboldt Bay, where you have the trail being used already as an active transportation corridor. So, you know, we're about to finish the Bay Trail South, so Arcata and Eureka will be connected, prime commuter territory. So that's an exciting part as well. And I sort of touched on it already, but the opportunity to clean up hazardous materials and other railroad related waste that has just been left. I mean, literally left, like when the train stopped running, everything just sat on the tracks. And in some cases has now washed down into the river. So really looking to get the chance to develop the trail and get rid of that stuff out of the natural environment. So those are some overall project goals. And I want to look a little bit about what it's going to look like in different areas. So here we have on this map in blue is where it's going to just be more of a backcountry trail. So something you'd see in a national forest or in a state park, just with natural, like a dirt path, natural earthen material. And so the most remote sections, like from Dos Rios, really all the way up to around Founders Grove area, looking for that to be more of a just like a dirt path hiking trail, since it's so remote. And then you can see the crushed stone multi-use trail in pink. Those are kind of those transition areas between populated and backcountry areas. And so, you know, it would be, yeah, just a crushed stone kind of walking path. And then you have in green the paved multi-use trails, really to be used as like an active transportation corridor. So that's where you'll see a lot more commuters. So all the way from Blue Lake down to Rio Dell, that's our huge main population center in Humboldt County. And so looking for that to be a what's called a class 1, which is a fully separated paved trail to be used for biking and walking. So that's what you already see like in the city of Arcata and what they're working on going around Humboldt Bay and the city of Eureka's waterfront trail. So a fully paved, nice separate trail. So those are just kind of, and this map is from our draft master plan. And so later on, I'll be showing you kind of where to find that and how to navigate it. So you can get a chance to look at this map again on your own. So yeah, just some kind of visuals of what those different trail types could look like. You've got your typical backcountry trail, the crushed stone multi-use trail, which is still good for biking and can still handle strollers and wheelchairs and things like that. And then the paved multi-use trail that we're all familiar with around Humboldt Bay. That's a little sample there. And some of the trail amenities that we're planning for, you know, you can't, it's not enough just to get the trail in. People need certain amenities. You might need benches and a rest area, a shade structure, a restroom, the all-important restrooms, trash and recycling receptacles, campgrounds that are evenly spaced in the backcountry area. So, you know, people have a place to camp at appropriate intervals. So it's usually around 8 miles is a good sized day hike, backpacking distance. And yeah, so we're looking at planning different campgrounds in the backcountry area and also access to down to the river and access to potable water. That's all very important. And in the more well, really all over the trail, public art. There's just a huge opportunity for public art on benches and similar to what you see along Eureka's waterfront trail and the city of Arcata's section of the trail, wayfinding and interpretive signage. And there are those awesome benches on the city of Eureka's section of the trail. So really looking for opportunities to include more public art that really helps with the placemaking and with the feel of the trail. So I want to talk a little bit about where we've been so far, where we are now, and where we're going. So as I mentioned before, the train stopped running around 1998. And so really people, especially in Humboldt County, really led the way in starting to think in the early 2000s about what, and maybe some of you were part of those conversations, about how we could use that railroad right of way for public good. And so various plans were developed over the years, but really it took until 2018 with Senate Bill 1029, which directed the California State Transportation Agency to conduct a feasibility assessment of the NCRA, their operations, and the right-of-way. And so that legislation was really crucial with Senator McGuire's support to recognize that the corridor represents a huge opportunity to create this long-distance recreation trail. So that was really crucial in 2018. And then in 2021, 2022, it was followed up by the California State Legislature through the passage of Senate Bill 69. And that's what created the Great Redwood Trail Agency that I work for, and really shut down the North Coast Railroad Authority and created the Great Redwood Trail Agency, with the goal, some of the goals that I've already mentioned, but especially pursuing rail banking and the preparation of a draft master plan for the whole corridor. And rail banking, I don't have a slide on it, but rail banking is a way to preserve that right of way for public use, for interim use as a trail until someday maybe the train comes back. So it's a way of preserving that right of way for public use, interim use as a trail. And we are here in this orange box right now. So over the past 2 years since the agency was created, we have been going through a very lengthy and intense tribal and community engagement process to gather information about the vision for the trail, and it's been compiled now into a draft master plan. So that was released in April for public comment, and it's actually open till July 3rd, so there's still time to provide feedback, and I'll go into that further. But this is kind of a huge milestone in terms of the development of the project and the development of the Great Redwood Trail Agency. It's kind of our first mandate after we were created in 2022 was start drafting this master plan. So we've enlisted the help of a variety of consultants and project staff from the State Coastal Conservancy to engage in that process and really compile it all into this draft master plan with best practices. So that's exciting that we have something now to look at. And alongside that process, we're also going through the CEQA process, the California Environmental Quality Act process of doing a program level environmental impact report. And so we just finished the scoping period, which is the first step in that creation of an EIR. And that will be out in about a year, and there will be opportunities for the public to comment on that draft and be engaged in that process as well. So that's kind of where we are now with the draft master plan, program environmental impact report, and here we are. So in the future, once all that is officially approved and we've done all the studies we need to do, that's not the end of it. We will need to start raising funding and going through the permitting process, and thinking about how to do operations and maintenance on the individual trail segments. So there's kind of a whole nother process of the more detailed design and detailed planning that goes in when we look at each individual segment. And each segment could be typically 3 to 10 miles in length. That's kind of a good project level size. Like if you think about how the Bay Trail was split into various phases, usually like a few miles at a time. And so we'll be looking to go through the funding process and permitting and design segment by segment to get it done. And then of course there's construction of each segment, and then we're done. But we're not done, because ongoing maintenance and management of the trail is just an ongoing part of what our agency's work will be far into the future. After everything's all done, there will always be the ongoing maintenance and operations part. So that's where we've been and where we're going. So I do want to talk a little bit about the master planning process and the program environmental impact report process that we're going through right now. And then we'll get into the draft master plan a little bit more and look at some parts of it. And I can show you how to navigate it. And then I'll talk a little bit about the future projects that we're going to start planning, and we'll get to time for your questions at the end. So, like I mentioned, the master plan has been in the works for about the last 2 years since our agency was formed. It was kind of our first mandate, was to get a better sense of how we're going to do this and what it's going to look like. So there was a really robust community and tribal engagement process. We've spoken with hundreds of people and have dozens of meetings with stakeholders and just everyday community members. Maybe some of you have participated in those or written us letters and comments. And so taking all of that and combining it with our best practices and experience with rail trails in this country over the last 40 years to really combine all of those recommendations of how things should be done in these various categories. So how do we protect cultural and natural resources? What should the governance of the trail look like? Who's in charge of it? Who's in charge of operations and maintenance? And how do you staff that? What's a good staffing structure? What types of positions, what types of employees and volunteers should you have to really make for efficient operations and the creation of a world-class trail? So the draft master plan provided us with recommendations. These are roughly, each of these points here roughly correspond to chapters in the draft master plan. And at the end of each chapter, and as you go through it, are recommendations that are kind of summarized. So they are summarized kind of in each of these areas: the trail design, what kind of, amenities and what should it actually look like, habitat restoration, and then how to prioritize projects. So there's a whole, it's a long trail, 231 miles that the Great Redwood Trail Agency is in charge of. And so the draft master plan broke that into, I think, 42 different segments and did some mapping and some prioritization. Our partnerships in that area to kind of look at, how do we break this down and prioritize different sections in terms of what we should tackle next. So that's a really important part of the recommendations in the draft plan. Funding sources also. We're definitely going to have a funding strategy that's a mixture of public and private funds and involves a lot of grant writing. And so the funding recommendations are really important. We're definitely keeping our eye on those funding sources for releases of grant funding. And permitting requirements. That for each individual segment is looking at all the different agencies that we're going to need to get permits from. So that is a really important part. Maybe not the most exciting part, but definitely an important step in the process. So happy to get those recommendations in the plan. And then operations and maintenance. Who's going to pick up the trash? Are there going to be rangers? How often are they going to patrol? What are some of the rules and like best operating practices on the trail that we're going to follow? So all of that is in our draft master plan, which is just a very short 586 pages long for your reading pleasure. And so we'll go through some of the sections and I'll show you a little bit how to navigate different sections, because it is actually really navigable, the document itself, in terms of clicking and just jumping to a certain section that you're interested in. So you don't have to read the entire thing if you're not interested in all of that. So here's how to get to the draft master plan, greatredwoodtrailplan.org. And in terms of commenting, there are a variety of ways to do that. I mean, you can actually go through on the website with this PDF commenting tool, and you can just click. If there's something you see on a map that you want to comment on, or a certain section, you just click and a little comment bubble will appear and you just type in whatever your thoughts are. So you can do it directly through the web comment tool as you're kind of skipping through the pages on the PDF on the computer. You can also write your comment through a contact form that's on that website as well. And that will get sent to us. You can also email us, or you can just call us and leave us a voicemail with all your thoughts. People have been doing that too, and it's kind of fun to just listen to people talk about, what they think and what they think we should be considering. So a variety of ways to comment, and we've just extended the comment period until July 3rd. So if any of you haven't had a chance yet to look at it, we're hoping you'll do that and give us your comments and feedback and ideas, because this is really a community-driven project. And so, you know, we've been going through this intense engagement process over the last 2 years, and this is the first draft to see, like, here's what we heard, here's what we're thinking, how does that resonate with everyone? So really important stage in the project to make your voice heard and connect with us. And then separately, we're going through environmental review of the draft master plan, and it is a high level, program level is what they call it, environmental impact report. So we'll be looking at the physical changes to the environment that are proposed in the draft master plan in terms of construction, visitation, operation, and maintenance, and looking at the potential environmental impacts of those physical changes on the environment. And these are just some of the categories of environmental review, some of the subject areas that we do anticipate will be like main areas that we will study. But again, these are kind of all of the categories that could be included in an environmental impact report, and in bold are the ones that we've definitely identified at this point that will be a part of the final report. But again, we just finished the scoping period, and so if members of the public and other agencies that we asked for their input, if they had any other of these areas, that would mean we would study those as well. So to be determined, but these are some examples of things we're going to be studying. And also, as part of drafting an environmental impact report, you have to evaluate different alternatives, including a no project alternative and at least 2 action alternatives that would respond to any of the conclusions that we make after we study those various areas. So things could end up changing, like different types of trail alignments, a different mix of recreation facilities, or changes in how our operations are structured. So a lot of things could still change. This is just a high-level planning document and just a draft at this point. So we're at an exciting point, but we're not done yet with the planning. And just a brief little timeline related to the program environmental impact report. Like I mentioned, hoping that we're preparing it later this winter and into early next year, and that we are ready to present it to our board like next spring. So later this fall/winter, we will release the draft of the environmental impact report, and there'll be a public comment review period. So that'll be another important part of public input on this process. And then we'll start prepping the final report to hopefully be adopted spring of 2025. So about a year from now, a little less than a year. Okay. Now some more fun stuff. This is more fun than what I've just been previously talking about, I promise. So greatredwoodtrailplan.org is where you can find our draft master plan. And you can either download the full PDF file so that you can look at it offline on your computer and just kind of peruse it at your leisure. Or like I said, you can use that, there's like an online PDF viewer that you can use to do the commenting tool. But either way, on pages 10 and 11, you'll see this master plan quick guide. And this really shows you, what topic are you interested in and where can you find it in the plan. So at a glance, you can just say, oh, I'm really interested in the tunnels and the bridges. Okay, great. Click here, chapter 3, existing conditions. So we've tried to make the draft master plan navigable, even though it is 586 pages. There are clickable links to different figures and tables and different sections throughout. So even if you just open to a random page and you start reading something and you're interested about it, you should see a link that will take you to some other part of the plan that also links to that. So it should be pretty easy to navigate. So I wanted to make sure to show you all the quick guide so you can just easily access what you're interested in. So if you're really interested in the tribal and community engagement that we did, how, what meetings we had, what ideas came out of those meetings, you'd click here for chapter 2 on tribal and community engagement. So just to continue with that, what topic are you interested in? Where can you find it? So the draft master plan really is, even though it is high level and it is a really big overview, it has a ton of information in it. So everything from, land management and ownership, tunnel inventory, to, all the parts of trail use and design, economic development, wayfinding and signage, just a lot of information in there. So you can quickly navigate it through this quick guide on pages 10 and 11. Operations and management is a huge chapter. It includes all kinds of things, like I was mentioning, the governance and staffing recommendations. Are we going to have trail rangers? What kinds of right-of-way agreements do we already have? What types of additional agreements might we need? Safety and risk management. What does our emergency operations look like? Emergency response, all sorts of things. So check out chapter 5 if any of these topics are of interest to you, to see what the recommendations are. And again, the comments are open, public comment period is open till July 3rd. So if you get into it and you see like, oh, they haven't thought about this, or maybe they should have a different approach to one of these issues, like, we are really looking for your comments and feedback. And yeah, chapter 6 is all about project prioritization. There are a ton of maps of the 42 different segments that I mentioned, and the maps really show a lot of things. They show where there are challenges and opportunities, both in terms of the infrastructure and the current state of the infrastructure, and also in terms of like community engagement, things that we heard. So there are a lot of opportunities, like we heard from different business owners or Chamber of Commerce, for example, that they were interested in partnering with us on XYZ. So the maps really show you that level of detail for where there are challenges and opportunities. And also we get into prioritizing different segments. So that's an exciting one. And the implementation strategy, what's next? How do we find funding? What kind of permits do we need? All those things. So that's the draft master plan. And I also mentioned at the end of each chapter and kind of throughout each chapter are summaries of the recommendations. So like, this is just a quick, I know this is a lot of text, I don't expect you to read it. It's just sort of showing you what you can find in the draft master plan. We have things like at the end of the tribal engagement chapter, a summary of the tribal recommendations. So things we heard from tribal governments and tribal members throughout the last 2 years of community outreach. These are a summary of the key ideas that we heard for how tribal people can be involved in the project, things they're concerned about, things they're excited about, and they're all summarized here. So exciting part of the plan is to have all of these recommendations and to know from the agency perspective and me as the director of the agency how to move forward and start implementing some of these recommendations. And here's just a summary table of some of the recommendations from the operations section. So you can see during the community engagement process, these issues came up, and here are the recommendations that are detailed in the draft master plan. So it really gives us kind of a roadmap of who to partner with and how to start tackling some of these issues. So the recommendations are kind of, at least for me, are a really important part of, concrete ideas that we got out of this draft master planning process that I can take and act on and move the agency and the project forward. I wanted to give you a little sample of the maps that are in the draft master plan. So this is on page 258, where we start prioritizing different segments. And so what you can see here is that tier 1 segments are, generally have a high impact, highly feasible, and they have a lot of momentum. So you can see a lot of tier 1 is right here around Humboldt Bay, where many of you may live. And so that's because there's so much momentum. You can see around Humboldt Bay already existing or under construction. So we really want to prioritize connecting from there, right? And continuing the trail from there. So south of Eureka all the way to CR and even all the way down to Rio Dell, Scotia has been prioritized as tier 1 for having a really high value, and out to Blue Lake too. So, we're really looking to prioritize planning for those sections, because how cool would it be to ride a bike all the way from Blue Lake to Rio Dell on a nice paved path that's totally separate from the highway? That is pretty cool. So those segments that are tier 1 have been determined to have a really high impact, and they're highly feasible. So we'll look to start working on those segments soon. And then we have tier 2 segments, like you can see little bits of tier 2 here, Eel River Canyon area, a little bit north of there. High impact or highly feasible, but usually not both. So like they kind of meet the criteria, but they're not enough to be a tier 1. So just looking at how to prioritize different segments. And so there are maps that kind of outline all of this in the draft master plan. And these are the segment maps that I mentioned. And so there are 42 segments that have maps like this, like a big two-page spread of maps. So this is the College of the Redwoods to Eureka segment that the County of Humboldt has been working on a planning grant for. And it will need an additional planning grant after the county's finished. They're just about to wrap up the first phase of planning. So it will need final design, planning, and permitting before it can go out to construction. And so this is an example of the map for that segment. And as you can see, different opportunities and constraints are noted. So it just really gives us a good sense of what the conditions are like and what they could be like with new development. Where might we have a different type of trailhead? There are several different types of trailheads, community access points, trailheads, and community gateways. Community gateways are the largest type of trailhead. They really are almost like a big park plaza sort of area with bathrooms. Maybe they have charging stations, and they really link the downtown business district with the trail and connect trail users with amenities in the community. So looking at where we can have community gateways and where there's opportunity for trail-oriented development, maybe river access, things like that. So there are 42 of these maps, segment by segment in the draft master plan that are definitely worth checking out because I mean, I love maps. It's like really great to visualize everything and really gives you a sense of what things look like and what they could be. And I do want to point out in teal are GRTA owned parcels. And so that's something that I was actually surprised to learn when I first started this role, that, you know, it's not just the linear right-of-way corridor. The GRTA also owns parcels where maybe there used to be a train station or a big railway yard, or maybe like a turnaround spot where they had like a big yard. And so we actually own acreage. Like you can see here, we have 25 acres between like down there near Humboldt Hill and Fields Landing. So there are, on these maps are also have, they've identified all the different GRTA owned parcels and where there's opportunity. I mean, some of them are not very usable and others might have potential. Opportunity for restoration or for trail amenities, things like that. So we do own a decent amount of land, which was surprising to me and also exciting. Well, I talk a little bit about Lolita. Lolita is a place where we have envisioned that there could be a community gateway. So again, those are the larger types of trailheads that really give people access to the downtown business district area. And the reason Lolita was chosen for a community gateway is partly because the GRTA owns this parcel where they have their park right now. And so and it's already being used kind of as a community park. And so it's a great spot right on the trail. The tracks go right through the middle of town, and the trail will go right through the middle of town. And we have this GRTA owned parcel here, and we have a lot of community support in Lolita, a lot of people that are really excited. And so this is a spot where we could have a community gateway. So it would really enhance that existing Lolita Community Park. You could have things like bathrooms, parking, a plaza, enhancements to the kind of active play court area that they have there now, picnic area, play area. So these are just conceptual designs. Nothing is set in stone, and you know, there's no funding at this point for actual planning and design and construction, but this gives you a good sense of what could be and what we could envision. And we would definitely be working closely with the community on the design of these amenities in the park area. And again, these are on the right, just all the different kind of types of access points and trailheads. And so you can see that the community gateway is the largest type of trailhead. It's really like a gateway to the community and the business district, and a key spot where people could begin their trip, for example, people that were coming from out of the area. And here's just kind of an artist's rendition. Again, it's not going to necessarily look like this. I know we get a lot of comments on like, what is this big round thing in the park? And we don't want the sculpture that looks like that. And so don't get too stuck on what it looks like. It's just an artist's imagination of what it could look like. And obviously decisions down to like what type of public art and who would design it are like far down the road. But it's just kind of cool to see what it could look like. So this is Lolita. And we've got a little picture of what it looks like now, although this is, I think, before Jersey Scoops. So if you guys have been down there since Jersey Scoops ice cream opened, it's looking a lot different down there and a lot better, a lot more busy. And yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the progress of the trail so far, and then I just have a few slides left to go through some segments that are either in the design phase or we're going to start planning soon. So this is a huge project, obviously 231 miles that the Great Redwood Trail Agency is in charge of planning and designing and constructing and maintaining and operating. And so, you know, the $1 million question that everyone always asks me is like, when is it going to be done? When are you going to get this thing done? And so we don't know, we don't have a final end date at this point, but I think it's important to look at the progress that has been made in partnership with a variety of agencies. And just to know that, you know, we've got almost 25%, 22% of the trail that's either complete, it's under construction, it's in the planning and design process, or we're soon going to begin planning it. So it's helpful, you know, helpful for me on a daily basis to kind of keep these numbers in mind and keep us moving towards the finish line. So some of those future segments, priorities for planning, for example, in the Eel River Canyon area, working with the Wildlands Conservancy. If you don't know anything about the Wildlands Conservancy, definitely check them out. An amazing organization, conserving land, really not just in this state, but all over the place. So they are a huge landowner and partner in the Eel River Canyon area. And there's several miles of the trail that goes in the tracks, the former railroad tracks, future trail that go through their Emerald Waters Reserve in the Eel River Canyon. So they are an important trail partner, and we're looking forward to starting to work with them to plan the segment that's on their property. And then I mentioned earlier that this is a community-driven grassroots effort, and we have a potential for this for the trail in terms of its impact on Alderpoint. And so they are looking to start planning about 4.5 miles of trail down in southern Humboldt. So it's exciting. And then I already mentioned Lolita. So looking to plan about 6 miles from College of the Redwoods, which is where the county's current planning grant ends. So from there down to Lolita and maybe even out to Fernbridge to be determined. But really working with the Lolita Community Chamber and local businesses and neighbors down there to start thinking about planning for that segment and what it could look like. And here's the park that I mentioned that happens to be a GRTA owned parcel. And then if you all have, I'm sure you've heard about the Humboldt Bay Harbor districts, huge grant funding that they just got to start working on the marine terminal. And as part of that, they have planned about 1.1 miles of trail to be built on the Samoa Peninsula along the border of their property. So that is an important partner that we're also working with to develop trail in that area. So those are some of the future planning priorities and more to be determined. Yeah, so I'll stop there. That was a lot of talking, and I want to leave it open for questions and
really need
comments.
to touch base and have confirmation about.
And so, yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I don't know, Ollie, how do you usually facilitate this? Should people be using the raise hand option, or how do you do this?
They can put questions in chat. They can raise their hands. They can just speak up, whatever works. Have you a preference?
No, I don't have a preference. So yeah, if anyone has any
Great.
questions, please let us
Okay,
know.
I have
yeah.
a question.
Great.
Funding. I understand from the paper that the state is in deep doo-doo this year. And how does that affect you? Where does the funding for this project come from?
Yeah, so my agency doesn't have any funding at this point for project-specific planning, design, or construction. So our funding is set and stable and is not impacted by that part of the state budget situation we have was allocated when we were first formed a few years ago. And that's what we have just for our agency operations. So in terms of looking for funding for actually building the trail, those would be a mixture of grant funds and private foundations, private donors, and public grant funds that could also come from the federal government. There are a variety of sources of funding for trail projects and planning. So we would be looking to write grants for those funds. For those
All right, good news.
How long does your funding last? Is it indefinite? Is it annual? How does it work?
At this point, it is not indefinite and it is not annual. And so we just have our original allocation. And I just got here a few months ago. And so, yes, working on a long-term sustainable funding strategy is definitely part of my role.
Are you working with groups that might contribute to your funding?
Not
Nonprofits,
formally.
for example.
Nonprofits, for example. Yeah, so we do work in close partnership with other agencies. I mean, as you all know, the city of Arcata, county of Humboldt, city of Eureka have already been doing this for years and building sections of the trail. And so, yes, definitely we work closely with our partners for funding, for grant funding as well. Because at this point, our agency does not have the capacity to be a lead agency to actually put projects out to bid. But we are looking to foster that capacity and get there in the next 3 to 5 years, where we could actually be doing what you see cities and counties doing in terms of the design and construction of trail.
So the EIR is currently funded, is that correct?
Yeah, the draft master plan and the environmental impact report, all of those high level planning documents and environmental review, yes, are funded, correct.
Are there particular group consulting firms that are doing that work?
Yeah, I didn't have a slide on them, but yes, Alta Planning and Design are our lead consultants on the draft master plan, and Ascent is handling the PEIR in the CEQA process.
Okay. And have you been getting a lot of public comment on the draft thus far?
Yeah, so far we have well over 100 comments on the draft master plan, and that was a couple of weeks ago, is the last time I've checked on it. So yes, we recently extended it till July 3rd, the public comment period for the draft master plan, because we were getting a ton of comments and we really want to make sure people have a chance to go through it. We really appreciate all the comments and we go through each one individually as a big team and talk about it. And so, yeah, now people have until July 3rd to get more comments in. So yeah, it's been a lot of input.
It was a matter of curiosity. Who makes up the team that evaluates the comments?
That's all of our staff internally and all of our consultant team. So it's probably a group of about 7 to 10 people, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And has that resulted in some substantial changes, or what kind of?
Yeah, it will. But again, we're still in that open public comment period. And so right now we're just logging all of the comments and tracking all of them. And then later this summer, after the public comment period closes, that's when we'll really dive deep into all the comments and look at the draft and make changes so we can prepare the final. So yeah, no changes have been made yet. But
how will the EIR fit into that whole process?
So they're happening like right alongside each other, and so they kind of both feed off of each other. It's a symbiotic relationship between the EIR and the draft. Yeah, so we're in good shape in terms of they're both kind of happening concurrently at the same time, and so there's room for one to change as a result of something that's happening with the other, if that makes sense.
Sure. Are there particular issues that have been raised, like security, like what's it going to cost to monitor this? What about, and I know certain landowners have been possibly challenging this trail. Has that been a problem?
So we have gotten a variety of community feedback over the last 2 years. And so, yeah, you'll see, especially in the operations and maintenance section, that's where we address things like security, rangers to patrol the trail, volunteer stewards, all sorts of things like that in terms of how safety and maintenance of the trail is going to happen. And so what we have right now are the recommendations that we've gotten from those landowners and all the discussions we've had with them, and looking at how other trails are managed over the 25,000 miles of trail that exist in the country. How do they do it? And so those are the recommendations that we now have in the draft master plan. So yes, we have some ideas, and again, have some ideas of where to look for funding and how to fund those things. And so nothing concrete yet, no decisions have been made, because again, we're just in this draft master plan process. Nothing is final yet. We're still in the planning process.
I thought you might have had some legal challenges and disputes over land and how it would affect private landowners. Is that not the case? I thought I'd heard something
Not
about
that I'm aware of. The section from Willits north up to around Humboldt Bay has been rail banked, and so that's a federal process where the federal government has given us the go-ahead to use our property as a public trail. So in terms of any legal challenges to that, I'm not aware of any, and that wouldn't be something that happens through my agency. That would be something that happens with landowners and the federal government, not anything to do with us. I'm not aware of anything.
So the feds can handle the legal challenges. Elliot, you have a question?
Yeah, I had questions on two segments. One was the corridor that's under construction right now between Arcata and Eureka. It looks like Caltrans. Can you update us on that? Like, when can I get my bicycle on that? And then I had a question about backcountry. Are those trails suitable for bicycle, or is it narrow walking dirt trails?
Yeah, those are good questions. So in terms of Humboldt Bay Trail, the last final 4 miles are being constructed right now, like you can see when you're driving around the bay. And as far as I have heard, just the latest update I got was a couple of weeks ago at the Trails Summit that the Humboldt Trails Council hosted. They are hoping to be done with that by the end of the year. So we'll be looking forward to having some kind of a ribbon cutting ceremony and getting out there to ride the trail. Yeah. So you'll be able to go from Arcata all the way through to south of Eureka to Humboldt Hill. Soon.
Excellent.
And then the backcountry trail, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like at this point, and what types of uses will be most appropriate given the trail type. That really happens like during the detailed segment by segment planning that has not been done yet. So just preliminarily, like the photo that I showed, shows backcountry trail being more of like a narrow hiking trail. And so we'll just have to see how wide it's able to be in certain areas, and if it'll accommodate bikes and horses, or if it's just going to be a really narrow walking path. And we won't know that till we really get into the planning of those individual segments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or issues that anybody would like to raise at this point? Sounds like not. Okay, do you have any final comment? Oh, Kay.
Yeah, there's a hand. Yeah.
Yeah, Kay, what would you like? You gotta unmute.
I was getting unmuted there for a minute. Yeah, I was wondering how much of the trail is going to be impacted by sea level rise and those kinds of things. I was concerned about the area around Humboldt Bay. It seems like it's right at water level right now. I'm not very informed about it, but I was a little concerned about that.
Yeah, and I know the county has done some studies and is looking to do more about that. And so I don't have all the details, but I do know that it is something that's being planned for. And there are places where the railroad, former railroad prism is kind of raised up and could actually act as a mitigation for sea level rise if it's constructed correctly, kind of almost like a seawall. So I don't have any specifics, but I know that the engineers are looking into it. And I think there is more of a planning process around sea level rise that is happening community wide. And so that will certainly be looked at.
Yeah, I wondered about some of the mountainous areas too, how far down into the canyon does the trail go, and with the rivers rising in the wintertime with the flooding
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard of that as being as much of a concern. Like this picture that's in the background right now, you can kind of tell. I did just river raft this section in the Eel River Canyon about a month or so ago, and so it's it's pretty high up. I don't think flooding is as much of a concern in the Eel River Canyon section, but again, there are other people that are definitely looking into that. So I don't have all the details.
We'll wait for answers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, Elaine, thank you very, very, very much for it. This is very interesting. I hope people will give you more comments. Maybe you'll
Yeah,
get
me
some
too.
from our group. And I really
Yes.
appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us. And I want to thank everybody who's attended and let you know that next Monday, Louisa Rogers will be talking about a tango of two homes where they spend part of the year in Guadalajara. Well, let me mutilate that. Mexico. And the other
It's
part of the year.
Guanajuato,
Oh, thank you, Kay.
kind of.
I need to brush up on my Spanish.
Me
Clearly,
too.
it's been a long time. I had a year at college. That was a long time ago. Anyway, it should be very interesting. She's a very interesting woman, and they have all kinds of adventures. So we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. And meantime, have a great week here in Humboldt County, and be thankful that you're not going to be part of the heat dome that's going to be covering where I'm going in Virginia. So I'm not looking forward to that. I had to find some summery kind of clothes to do that with. And have a great week. Do sign up for courses. We need to have you join up if you haven't. And there are a lot of really neat courses. So we'll hope to see you there. Thank you ever so much.
Thank
And
you.
we're out of here.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.